Okay, welcome back everybody to part two. In this section, I want to give us a bit of a scriptural introduction, and I'm going to talk about one story in particular, the second creation account, the story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. It's in Genesis chapter 2 and 3. It comes second in the scriptures, but it was actually written first. So it's the earlier of the two creation accounts, Genesis 2 and 3. um, Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. I've already mentioned these are the major characters of the story: God, Adam and Eve, and the story takes place in the garden, and I have earth in parentheses. So I think you'd agree with me that in the beginning of the story, Adam and Eve have a great relationship with each other. They were husband and wife. They were presumably in love with each other. They had just a great time hanging out together in the garden. Wonderful relationship between Adam and Eve. And they have a great relationship with God. Genesis says that every afternoon God would come and visit with them in the garden. Don't know what they did. Maybe they had tea together, caught up on each other's day, whatever they did. I don't know, but they visited with each other every afternoon. I think it says late in the day, maybe every afternoon they visited with each other in the garden, and they had a great relationship with the garden itself. And this is the relationship that I really want you to pay attention to. Remember when I was introducing myself in part one, um, I began to see all of this as a relationship between me and the earth, or between me and God's creation, and felt like it was really a part of my Christian faith. And so this story helps to illustrate that from a biblical scriptural perspective. So Adam and Eve had a relationship with the garden, and I call it a relationship in this story simply because God told Adam, "You are to till and keep the garden." And in return, the garden provided food for them. So it's like, if you take care of me and I take care of you, then we have some sort of a relationship with each other. So I understand this as a relationship between Adam and Eve and the garden, or between Adam and Eve and the earth, or humanity and the earth. So in the beginning of the story, these three relationships: relationship between Adam and Eve, relationship between these guys and God, and relationship between the two of them and the earth. These three relationships at the beginning of the story were fantastic. They were wonderful. Then a big deal thing happened halfway through this story, and you know what it is. The serpent came along and tempted Eve to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil that God had told them to stay away from. And so, of course, they couldn't do that. So the serpent tempted Eve to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. She thought it was great. She shared some with Adam. He thought it was wonderful. And so after they ate this fruit, they noticed something about themselves and each other. They were naked, and they had to cover their parts from then on. And there was another thing that happened because in terms of their relationship. When God came to Adam after the serpent thing and said, "Hey, Adam, what's up? What's going on? What have y'all done?" Adam said, "Oh, she made me do it." And then God went to Eve and said, what's up with this, Eve?" And Eve said, "The serpent made me do it." So two things happened in terms of their relationship. One is they discovered they were naked and they have to cover their parts. The other is they started to pass the buck. So now they're still husband and wife. They're still presumably in love with each other. They still probably have a really good relationship with each other. But now there's some brokenness to that relationship. It's not quite as perfect and wonderful and pure as it was in the beginning of the story. I hope that is okay for me to say that. Um, so the relationship is still there, but there's just some brokenness to it. In terms of their relationship with God, you remember after the serpent thing, God came looking for them in the garden one afternoon. God always came every afternoon. God came looking for them one afternoon, and God couldn't find them because they were hiding. They had disobeyed, they felt embarrassed or ashamed. I don't know why exactly, but for whatever reason, they felt like they needed to hide from God. But their relationship with God wasn't destroyed either, but it was broken. It wasn't as wonderful as it once was in the beginning of the story. And similarly with their relationship with the garden, at the end of the story, you know this, they got kicked out of the garden. So their relationship with the garden was pretty much broken. They still had a relationship with the earth, however, otherwise they would have starved to death. But it was a more difficult relationship. It became harder for them to coax the earth to provide food for them. So this relationship, too, was not destroyed, but it was damaged. The other little known fact about this relationship is that when they got kicked out of the garden at the very end of the story, and you should read this, it's right there, Genesis 3. When they get kicked out of the garden, God curses the land, which is very unfair to me. That's a hard part of the story for me, because the land, the earth, the garden, never did anything wrong. But because Adam and Eve disobeyed God, in other words, because this relationship was no longer as wonderful as it once was, the land has suffered negative consequences because of that. So think about that, particularly in this day and age, when we look all over this planet and see some of the devastation that's going on, and some of the suffering and some of the problems that the earth is facing. Could that be a symptom of the fact that our relationship with God might not be quite what it should be? So that's something for y'all to think about. So a couple of more things about this story that I want to lift up for you. One is that one of my most favorite passages in the Bible comes from this story. It's the creation of Adam. Remember how Adam was created? He was created out of the dust of the earth, and my imagination says that it feels like God reached down and just brought up a couple of handfuls of earth. And Genesis says God formed the man. It's like God took the earth, the dust of the earth, and made this man Adam. But that wasn't enough for his creation, was it? You know what else had to happen? God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. I love that. And so what I take from that is how can we as human beings, how can we be any more in relationship with the earth than to have been created out of it? And scientists can tell us now that the molecules in your bodies and the molecules in the earth are the same. So literally, we come out of the earth. We are created out of the dust of the earth. So we're in relationship with the earth just because we exist as human beings. And we're in relationship with God because we breathe the breath of the one that created it all. It's incredible to me. I love that passage. Another piece that's significant in this story is after God created Adam, God was concerned that Adam was going to be lonely. And so God said, we got to find a partner for Adam. And I do this workshop fairly regularly, and almost every time when I say, what happened next in the story? After God said, we got to find a partner for Adam, what did God do next? And almost everybody says, God put Adam to sleep, took the rib out, and created Eve. And that is incorrect. The next thing that happened in the story is that God created all the animals and paraded them in front of Adam one at a time, and Adam named them all. And then the writer of Genesis says, but none of those were formed none of those were found to be adequate partners for Adam. So then God put Adam to sleep and created Eve. So could there have been some notion on God's part of a relationship or a partnership between Adam and the animals, between humanity and the natural world? Could it be that God has this partnership thing in mind, and could the scriptures actually reflect that? I would suggest yes. God told Adam in this story to till and keep the garden. That was the first time ever that God told a human being what to do in terms of a vocation. So that I see that as a vocational call from God to all of humanity to till and keep the earth. Till it, yes. Use the earth to provide for us? Absolutely. Farm it, raise animals, use the earth to provide food for us? No problem. Absolutely. But keep it. So till it and keep it. Use it, but don't destroy it. Use it, but keep it. And for me, that means I have to keep it so that other generations that will come after me will have something to use themselves. So till it and keep it. Vocational call by God to Adam. It's interesting that God did not say to all of those animals that God created, God did not tell them to till and keep the garden. God only told the human beings to do that. So could it be a uniquely God-driven call to you and me as Christians that we are the ones, humanity are the ones that are called to till and keep the garden? That's something that you guys can discuss. Okay, so I hope that I've established for you that there is a biblical mandate. I think it's a mandate that all of us as Christians be in relationship with God's creation. I think that's clear biblically. As a theologian, makes so much sense to me. But then if you have a relationship with the earth, then it's up to you to figure out how to live that out. Just like you have a relationship with each other, and you can live that out in some positive ways and some negative ways, we have a relationship with the earth, and we can live out that relationship in some positive ways or some negative ways. And I can't tell you how to be in relationship with the earth. I'm merely suggesting to you to think about your Christianity that perhaps includes a relationship with the earth, and then it's up to you to figure out how to live that out. You may be into climate change, for example. You may become a climate activist like Greta Thunberg. You probably know that name by now. You may be into pollution issues. You may be concerned about water quality in a stream in your locale, wherever you live. You might be concerned about air quality. It's been interesting in this time of lockdown during this pandemic. Both air quality and water quality have improved significantly because we're not quite as active as we have been. So you might be concerned about those kinds of issues. You might be into recycling or energy. There's any number of ways that you can choose to live out this relationship with the earth. You may simply want to spend more time outside to see if maybe being out in nature is a spiritual kind of a thing for you, a way for you to be more involved with God by being out in nature, by being in relationship with God's creation. So I would just encourage you to think about all of those ways in your own personal life. And then I think I mentioned this too in part one. Think too about the mission of the church, because the church has focused primarily on this relationship between humanity and God, right? We introduce people to God. We pay attention to this relationship, and because we're Christians, we introduce people to God through the person of Jesus Christ. That's been the mission of the church for 2,000 plus years. But then we made an interesting discovery somewhere along the way. We discovered that if we have a relationship with God, we have to have a relationship with each other. This relationship among human beings is not an option if we have a relationship with God. That's why the church is in mission all over the world. That's why we send volunteer and mission teams to Appalachia Service Projects or to UMCOR projects to help people survive disasters, hurricanes or floods or what have you. We have this because of the love that we share with God. We love one another. This is not optional. And so I want you to consider this notion that if we have this loving relationship with God, we also must have a loving relationship with the earth. That just as this relationship is not optional, neither is this one. So I want you to consider all of this for your own personal life, and I want you to think about it as well for the life of the church and for the church in mission. Again, I think I mentioned this before, whether it be your own youth group or your own local congregation or even the denomination. Think about the mission of the church that would include this relationship. Okay, thanks. I'm going to do a part 3 as well that is optional for you. These parts are going to be on YouTube, so you could check them out at your leisure if you're interested in more of a conversation about Scripture. That will be in part 3. But I don't want to take up too much of your time, so I'm dividing it into different pieces for you. So it's been great being with you, and I wish you well, and I'm hoping that you'll have some great conversations, and I'm around to answer some questions for you or have further conversation. Okay, thanks.